Manure power unlocked. The ancient curing trick that changes everything. Most gardeners are using manure the wrong way, and honestly, it's quietly damaging their soil more than helping it. The biggest mistake isn't using manure at all, it's using it too early. Fresh or poorly cured manure doesn't just feed plants. It burns roots, locks up nitrogen, and disrupts the microbial balance your soil depends on. That's why you'll see stunted growth, yellowing leaves, and soil that smells wrong instead of rich. Instead of building fertility, you're creating instability. And well, the worst part is, it looks like you're doing everything right. Now, before we get into the ancient curing method that completely changed how I use manure, there's one small habit that made a massive difference in how effective this system became. I started managing my organic inputs properly, right from the kitchen using a sealed countertop bin, the Enloy compost bin. Most people let scraps rot inconsistently or dry out before they're ever used, which honestly weakens their biological value. This bin keeps everything fresh, contained, and odor-free, so when I integrate it into curing systems, it actually contributes to microbial activity. I'll leave the exact one I use in the description if you want to check it out. It's a small detail, but it directly affects the strength of everything you build in your soil. Because manure doesn't become powerful by sitting, it becomes powerful by curing correctly. So let's talk about what fresh manure actually does to your soil. There's a common belief out there that manure is instantly beneficial, but honestly it's not. Fresh manure is high in ammonia and unstable nitrogen compounds. When you apply it directly, it can burn plant roots and overwhelm soil microbes. Even worse, it can trigger microbial imbalances that actually slow down decomposition instead of speeding it up. I've tested this in multiple beds, The ones that received fresh manure showed slower recovery, uneven growth, and more stress compared to properly cured inputs. That's not a nutrient issue at all. That's a biological issue. The ancient method wasn't about just aging manure, it was about transforming it. Most people think curing manure just means letting it sit, but that's incomplete. Traditional systems didn't simply age manure, they layered, balanced, and controlled its breakdown. They understood something most modern advice ignores. Manure needs structure, carbon, and airflow to actually become stable. Without those, it doesn't cure properly, it just decays. The moment I stopped stockpiling manure and started curing it intentionally, everything began to change. I used to just pile manure in a corner and wait, hoping for the best. Sometimes it worked, and, well, sometimes it didn't. The results were pretty inconsistent, so I shifted to a structured curing process. Instead of leaving manure alone, I began layering it with dry carbon materials, leaves, straw, shredded plant waste. And honestly, the difference was noticeable right away. The heat stabilized, the smell improved, and the texture changed much faster. That's when I realized curing isn't passive, it's actually quite active. This is the curing method that actually works. I start with a base layer of dry material, about 10 to 15 centimeters thick. Then I add a thinner layer of manure, around 5 to 8 centimeters. After that, I put down another carbon layer, and then I just repeat the whole process. The ratio really matters here. You want more carbon than manure, roughly 2 parts dry material to 1 part manure. Then I lightly moisten the pile. Not soaked, just damp enough to support microbial activity. This creates a balanced environment where microbes can break down the manure efficiently without releasing excess ammonia. Why this method changes everything is actually pretty fascinating. When manure is cured this way, it becomes stable. Nitrogen binds into organic forms instead of escaping into the air. Pathogens break down, odor disappears, and the texture becomes crumbly. But the biggest difference is biological. You're not just creating fertilizer, You're creating a living input that feeds your soil system instead of shocking it. In my raised beds, this led to faster plant establishment and deeper root growth compared to using standard compost or raw manure. So, there's a timing window that most people miss. Cured manure isn't about waiting a fixed number of weeks. It's really about observing transformation. When the pile no longer smells sharp, when the material becomes dark and uniform, and when the heat stabilizes, well, that's when it's ready. Depending on your conditions, this can take anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks with proper layering. That's actually faster than most compost systems and honestly a lot more reliable. This is where most gardeners accidentally ruin the process. They either add too much manure or not enough carbon. Too much manure creates excess heat and ammonia loss. Too little moisture slows everything down, or they compact the pile, reducing airflow. Each of these mistakes disrupts microbial activity. The goal is balance, not volume. You're building an environment, not just a pile. How I apply cured manure for maximum effect. I don't bury it deep. That's another common mistake. I apply it as a surface layer about 2 to 3 centimeters thick and let biological activity pull it into the soil. This keeps the system active at the surface where most microbial interactions happen. In one of my beds, this approach improved soil structure within a single growing cycle. No digging, no disruption, just integration. This method works in smaller setups too, but needs control. In containers, you use much smaller amounts. A thin layer mixed lightly into the topsoil or used as a surface feed works best. Too much can overwhelm a small system, but when done correctly, it stabilizes container soil and reduces the need for frequent feeding. That's something most container growers struggle with. Even hydroponic growers can take something from this. You're not using manure in hydro systems, but the principle still applies. Stability matters more than intensity. When nutrients are balanced and delivered consistently, plants perform better. This curing method creates that kind of stability in soil systems. What I noticed after switching to properly cured manure. The difference wasn't just visible, it was consistent. Plants established faster, leaves stayed healthier, and growth didn't spike and crash. The soil itself became more stable. Moisture retention improved. Structure held together better, and most importantly, I stopped seeing the negative effects that come from raw inputs. That's when you know the system is working. Why modern advice oversimplifies manure use. It treats manure as a product instead of a process. Add this, get results, but that's not how soil works. Manure has to be transformed before it becomes beneficial. Otherwise, you're adding instability, not fertility. Once you understand this, manure becomes one of your most powerful tools. Not because it's strong, but because it's balanced. When cured properly, it feeds soil life, supports structure, and provides nutrients in a stable form. That's what creates long-term improvement. If you're serious about building soil that performs consistently, stop using raw manure and start curing it the right way. Subscribe if you want more real-world experience-based techniques like this, focused on what actually works in real gardens. And if you know someone struggling with manure burning their plants or giving inconsistent results, share this with them. This one shift can completely change how they use one of the most powerful resources in gardening.